Welcome to Module 1. By the end of this module, you should have a clear understanding of what fashion law entails, right? So first off, we're just going to jump into the definition of fashion law. So fashion law is a business law specialty that deals with the problems and legal issues that are related to the fashion and lifestyle companies in the global space. So some of the legal issues include like the ownership of intellectual property rights, the enforcement of intellectual property rights, entity formation, import and export issues, data privacy, as well as several other issues. So when you hear fashion law, sometimes people would say, okay, fashion law, are we talking about the fashion police? No. Fashion police, fashion law, it's like two different things entirely. Fashion law is an area of law. It's a business law area, right? And it caters for the needs of creatives in the fashion industry and in the lifestyle industry. So there's several other misconceptions about fashion law, apart from the question around, is fashion law, related to the fashion police? There's the misconception that, fashion law is solely about intellectual property law. So that's a wrong misconception. Fashion law is not solely about intellectual property law. There are several other areas which we'll be talking about in this lesson. So stay tuned. So there's the misconception that, fashion law solely caters for the apparel industry, solely caters to the, fashion designers or fashion stylists. There are several other industries that fashion law caters to, and I'll be jumping right into it right now. Now let's go into everything you need to know about the fashion industry. So like I stated earlier, fashion law does not cater solely to the, apparel industry. There are several other industries, right? So as a lawyer or as a designer or as somebody in the creative industry, when you hear fashion law, know that it's not just about, apparels. Other industries that fall under fashion law, that fashion law can cater to, is the beauty industry, the jewelry industry, the luxury fragrance industry. We have the textile industry, we have the modeling industry, and we have the leather industry. Like listening to it now, I'm sure you'll be like, yeah, they all fall under the fashion industry. But then when you check them out like individually, or you bring out maybe the beauty industry and you check it out, you understand that, okay, it stands out on its own, but then fashion law cater to this area, to this industry. So as a fashion lawyer, or as, like someone who wants to delve into a business in fashion or in lifestyle, you need to understand that your legal solution lies with fashion law. Then also there is the social media aspects. We have fashion influencers these days. So in the instance of fashion influencers, they're also catered to by fashion lawyers. So fashion lawyers also cater to, fashion photographers, fashion event producers. The list is endless, right? But I just decided to spot this out, like this, particular industry, so that you'll be aware of these particular sectors as it relates to fashion law. So now we're going to look at the sub-sectors, because now we've looked at the primary sector, or like the primary industries. We're going to look at the subsectors that are, like under these industries, because like most of these industries, they have like similar sectors. So we'll be looking at them together. Okay, so right now we're jumping into the subsectors. So there are subsectors of the industries which I mentioned previously, like the beauty industry, the textile industry, all those industries, they have subsectors, and most times their sectors are like pretty similar, and I'll try and like explain it's in a detailed form so that you can, like understand how the subsectors are applicable to all the industries. So for instance, we have the designing subsector. So the designing subsector basically deals with illustrators. For instance, we might have like fashion illustrators, the designing stage, the idea stage, the creation stage. That's the first stage, right? And in this instance, intellectual property comes to play. We're still going to go into, the legal areas, but it's important that you know that, okay, with designing, intellectual property comes to play. And there's several other agreements that come to play here also. Then we have sourcing. So in an instance where you need to source for like raw materials, where you need to source for fabrics, this is also like an area. In this aspect, you might have like, employees. That's if you're a creative, or if you're a fashion lawyer at this point, you need to understand that, okay, what comes to play at this point. So you need to understand that, okay, with sourcing, what agreements do I need, or what agreements does my client need? So as a fashion lawyer, you're coming from the perspective that, okay, my client would need this particular agreement at this point. So you need to understand the importance of the agreements, in the instance where you're sourcing for fabrics or where you are sourcing for like raw materials to achieve your product. So for instance, you might have a beauty product, for instance, right? In that instance, when you're sourcing for raw materials, you need to be able to define certain specific terms. And in that instance, you would need an agreement. Next off, the next subsector which you need to be aware of is the manufacturing sector. So this sector pretty much brings, the designing, the sourcing, it brings it all together. And here you have your final product, if it's a makeup product, or you have your final garments, which you would be marketing out into the public. So in this instance, the law equally comes to play. And as a fashion lawyer, you equally need to understand that, okay, there are certain agreements. For instance, there's the manufacturing agreement. You need to understand that. And as a creative also, you need to understand that before you work with maybe a tailor or a manufacturing company, you have your manufacturing agreement, right? And stipulates, clear terms as it applies to your business. You talk about the numbers, you talk about the, quality control, the standard that you expect the product to be in. These are things that you have to be specific on, unless you would, like the consequence would be on your business, on your brand, or on your clients. So it's important that you understand that, okay, as a fashion lawyer, as a creative, the manufacturing sector has its legalities which you need to be aware of. So it's important that you don't sideline it or ignore the specifics as it applies to the industry. Yeah, and we have the distribution sector. So this is usually big because, you have to deliver your products from one end to the other. If you run an e-commerce company, for instance, you might be trading on a global scale. You might have your brand on a global scale. So in that instance, you need your privacy policy for your website, you need your terms and condition, you need your disclaimer, you need a number of things. You need to be aware of, the import and export issues as it applies to, distributing your product, the laws that apply to your specific products. If you need licenses, it's important that you have a clear understanding of this. You can't just, jump into the market and next off, you're just distributing. And even if you're distributing on a small scale, if you have single logistic bikes, you still need to have some sort of, agreements, documentation that can help you track your products and also define certain terms. So it's important that you take note of this, you understand that equally in your distribution, in distributing your products, the law comes to play. And next up, we'll be looking at branding. I know I was supposed to maybe take branding before distribution because manufacturing, branding, yeah, but I'm just going to take it now. So branding. In branding your product, in branding your business as a whole, you need to have a trademark, right? The trademark can be a logo, it can be in form of, like a word. So in that instance, you need to protect it as it is your brand identity. You need to have it protected. And here is where fashion lore equally comes and, let's say, it builds you out pretty much and provides direction as to the best way to protect your trademark, to protect your brand. Yeah, so next we have the marketing sector. In this instance, you need to access your audience. You need to push out your product and get people to buy it, basically. So you might be working with fashion influencers, stylists, and you would need an agreement equally, the pool agreement. So in this sector, it's important, like fashion lore is really important equally in this sector. That's the marketing sector. Next up, we'll be looking at the wholesale and the retail sector. Like the wholesale and retail sector is it's pretty big, or it's pretty vast rather. And when you think about it, you're like, okay, how does it apply? There are two different sectors, and fashion lore applies to it as it relates to, the industries that were previously mentioned. And when I say the industries, I'm just talking about the beauty industry, the jewelry industry, and co. So there are legal key points that you need to understand as it relates to, the wholesale sector, the retail sector, as it relates to, or as it's concerned to the industries. That's the beauty, the jewelry, the fragrance industry, and so on and so forth. Then we also have employees management. So in managing your employees, you need your company policy, you need an employment handbook, you need a number of things. In this instance, in managing your company as a whole, you need your company policy for your company as a whole. But then there are several other documents that you would need as a creative. So it's important that fashion lawyers are aware of this aspect and this area. Also, in customer management, in managing your customers, there are several legal issues that can spring up. Usually you hear about the ethical issues, you hear about sustainability, you hear about greenwashing. There are several issues as a lawyer which you need to be aware of, and as a creative which you need to be aware of, so that when you're aware of these issues, or when you're aware of this different sectors, you know that okay, the law comes to play here and the law comes to play in this instance, and you would not push it aside because it is very important. So next up now, we'll be going into Module 2, where I'll be teaching you all about the skills of a fashion lawyer and the responsibilities of a fashion lawyer. So if you want to build a career as a fashion lawyer, you're interested in fashion law, yeah, we're moving on into the skills that you require and further details that you need to understand as a fashion lawyer.